Isn't there supposed to be some type of planning process at the end of a quarter? If you've ever read a business book, then you'd be led to believe that's the case. As an integrator with small businesses, I can tell you it's a very common practice. It's an aspiration, at least, to do some type of quarterly planning. That's to say, what do we need to do over the course of the next 12 weeks to stay on track with our goals? Oftentimes, it's not done. And when it is, it's done poorly. A hasty, slapstick process that is viewed as an obligation rather than an opportunity, done to a threshold of quality that could be considered as just enough to get by. I've made it my mission for some years to make that process faster and higher quality and more accessible, and have personally delivered dozens and dozens of quarterly plans for my clients. And I've learned a couple things on how to do it right, how to do it well, and how to do it in an expedient manner. So if you're like me, then you have seen how fast things are moving right now with technology, and felt a mixture of feelings, which is one part excitement. You can get done weeks and months of knowledge work in an afternoon. That's exciting for someone who literally would spend weeks putting deliverables together with clients just a few short years ago. To be able to have that done like that, it's awesome. It's also terrifying. How do we stave off obscurity? How do we stay relevant and competitive and position ourselves advantageously in this rapidly changing environment? On one hand, I think to myself, controlled violence of action is the name of the game. Wake up, belly up to the desk, and get as aggressive as you possibly can. Watch every tutorial that you can. Go through every single course that you can, every book that you can. Cut through every talk from thinkers, from leaders, from people in the relevant spaces in industry and technology and finance and key trends. Be very cognizant and aware of the current state, and anyone who has a sense for the trajectory this is going, hear what they have to say and build your own opinion. That's important. And that's not new, right? That's what you have to do as a business owner, as a CEO. It just seems like the stakes are higher now because the transformation is accelerating beyond comprehension. It's so fast. It's unprecedented. So again, controlled violence of action, pulling out the infantry mindset and just going as hard as possible. Locking is one part of that, leaving no stone left unturned and getting really aggressive. That doesn't tell the whole story. And I think there's another quieter piece to this that wisdom compels us to consider and evaluate. So a few weeks back, I was sitting at dinner with my wife. I said, I guess it just was hitting me a little harder than other days. Sometimes you get numb to it because it's the new normal in a way. But this particular evening, about a month ago, a part of me was lamenting where it's at, because what it necessarily means, where it's going. And it's February and it's already changed. I'm telling my wife, I'm saying, babe, it's like there's an alien in the computer. It's unbelievable. It's mind blowing. And where it's going to be by the Christmas time, where it's going to be by this time next year, I can't even imagine how powerful it's going to be. So my wife was really encouraging, told me that you've been expecting this, right? You've been talking about this for literally years, building self-optimizing enterprises and persistent autonomous organizations and workforce disintermediation. Haven't you been talking about this and working towards this for years? And the answer is since 2019, in fact, we've been working on this type of thing. But it still doesn't mean it's not surprising when you see it, right? It's one thing to have an abstract concept, to see a simple MVP or proof of concept deployed, feasibility test to be deployed in the real world, but to see it working, I think part of that comes from the novelty of this moment in time. It's unprecedented. It's having a technology that replaces cognitive labor. That's what is new. It's unprecedented. It hasn't happened before. It's not like we're finding a better way to make electricity or a new water purification technology or to make new textiles. It's a meaningful improvement on something that already exists. There's nothing like this that has existed before. The only way to get cognitive labor done is only cognitive force existed within people's minds. And to do automations and coding and software development and any of that stuff required an immense amount of cognitive labor, right? Manual work, basically, knowledge work encoded into systems, and it is cost prohibitive, time consuming, and now it's rapid and accessible and high quality and relatively easy. And it's still very early days. So I think the newness of that is anxiety provoking. It's unfamiliar territory. So where I landed on after some prayer and thought about it was important to look at what is not new, what is universal, what's occurring underneath of all of this that is part of a longer pattern throughout history of structural revolutions, of emerging technologies that have fundamentally changed society, that have changed the way that life is done, that are the same here, the first principles. I started considering that and look at even small example with the Mongolians in ancient China. They were able to defeat the Chinese imperial armies that were of superior size, resources, and preparedness in terms of their equipment, in large part due to technological innovation. They were able to be superior in their speed because of the stirrups. They were able to do mobile firing from their horses incredibly fast, and they just outpaced the Chinese. But there's a small piece, and I think of Ford with his automobile manufacturing and Rockefeller with oil. There was a time where some new insight technology emerged that gave one party, one agent, one actor an asymmetric advantage, a structural advantage, use that to win and win in a big way. And likewise, there's tales throughout history of those who failed to recognize the shifting paradigm and take advantage of the opportunities that emerging technologies brought and were consumed to the sands of time. Their only memory, if any, is that of a cautionary tale. So, for example, Kodak and the digital camera, Blockbuster, and video on demand. Those are just two modern examples. The list goes on and on. A big fan of Robert Greene's books. I love his writing, how there's a compelling narrative where he says, here's a law, here's a principle from history that's proven itself time and time again. It transcends individual circumstance. It's ubiquitous and universal, and it applies to your life. Historical anecdote shows what happens when you observe the law, when you put it into practice. Here's what happens when you break it, when there's a transgression against the law. And then here's where there might be a reversal of the law, when the inverse is applied. I really like that, especially when there's compelling, well-structured historical anecdotes in a story form. That's how I like to learn stuff, at least. And I thought, man, I wish Robert Greene wrote a book of asymmetric advantage in the AI era. I want that book. And so here I am after dinner, my head's racing. I'm thinking about all that. I'm like, man, I wish that was on audio right now. I would crush that book. And so I thought, okay, I've got Claude, I've got AI. I'll just ask it. I'm curious about historical anecdotes throughout history that elucidate a set of first principles on how to gain asymmetric advantage during times of structural revolution caused in large part from emerging technologies. And I want to understand, winners and losers. What are the patterns there? And who lost and why? I don't want to be one of those guys. Kind of say gallows humor. I say, I don't want to be in a Soviet era breadline with my wife and kids a few years from now. That asymmetric advantage will manifest itself as a resource accumulation. And I think the big play is towards private equity and portfolio management, to put it in executive terms. It's the ability to build very profitable organizations that are almost entirely autonomous and highly competitive at a global scale. And in terms of their competitiveness, I think they'll be peerless. Their capital efficiency, other metrics that matter. I put a pretty decent amount of thought into that. And what I ended up doing was taking my initial thought structure on asymmetrical study, and the working title became Physics of Asymmetry, and ended up producing a pretty significant knowledge base. And that became a book. And I thought to myself, I was listening to it chapter by chapter, and I started thinking, man, this is freaking good. The one detail I would share is I had 3 frontier models debate the source material and the sort of the core laws underneath of it. And once we landed on a consensus on the laws, the first principles, then we started building out the blueprint for historical anecdotes, and then I did the book. So that was the methodology, and we just generated the book one chapter at a time, all in Opus 4.6, which brings me to the point of starting to listen to it. After I cut through the preface and chapter 1 and chapter 2, I thought, dang, this is like Robert Greene books. This is a book. This is a real solid book, which is scary in its own right, because those things are usually, writing a book is this massive endeavor, super demanding. So the fact that it was done the way it was caused me to rethink what a book is. I'm coming to this more as a reader of a book than I am the creator of a book. Even though I did commission the work, I am in the position more of the consumer of it, the student of the material, as much as I am the creator of it, probably more so, to be completely honest. So I did curate in the information, and I did directly commission the synthesis to occur, but the knowledge work was done by the large language models. And I thought it was just so compelling, so perfect suited to what I wished had existed. So going through this has been awesome because it feels like some of my favorite authors produced a book exactly what I wanted. I bet you there's a few other people out there that would like this type of book too. My view is that it was a knowledge-based asset that could help me from a historical standpoint as I'm working to stay as current and dialed into the future as possible. But the more I went through it, I thought, I bet others would like this too. I can just throw it into a quick app and make it an audio book. I've made it, maybe one or two people are going to cut into it really quickly. I got some traction. I would say I've had a sort of pressure from that traction has caused me to aggregate all of the books, because I did that same process with a few other things to get a comprehensive, holistic 360 view as best I can in 5 sort of complementary area fields of research. One of them is the physics of asymmetry and gaining advantage during times of structural evolution. Second is the terrain of human endeavor. Third, persistent autonomous organizations. The AI suggested we name it the persistent machine. The fourth is on levels of abstraction of information. And the AI decided calling it the translation layer was better, but it effectively discusses the nature of abstracting information from source to interface, and then it was on cognition. So all 5 of those books have been ran through that similar production process and have been really enriching. I wanted to share them with the community and with friends and clients. So they're free. They're all on the website. I wanted to get into rocks for Q2, but that's not for me to jump. I appreciate you guys. I'll finish by saying the material in those books is so rich and densely packed with historical anecdotes that tell a story. It stirs my spirit. It's compelling and enlivening and encouraging. I believe it's a message of hope. It brings a level of peace, and it points to a set of universal truths in the past that we can learn from, that we can draw insight and wisdom from. That's really cool, especially when we know we can apply it to today. And it's not just what's new and what's different and what's unprecedented. It's also what is precedented. And I think what you'll find if you start cutting through these, as I have, that there's a lot. We have to do some thinking. We have to do a little bit of intellectual acrobatics to apply the principles to the current circumstances, as I've had to do. Fortunately, we have AI to help us do that. We've got some exciting things in store beyond the audio books, which are almost all the way, I think 3 out of the 5 are dialed in with audio. It's not exactly perfect. They're a little buggy. And we're going to get a graphic novel in place so it can tell more of a visual story as you're going through it. And then we're going to do videos on each of the chapters, and content will be spun off from there. And then all those 5 knowledge bases are informing my nexus, which is decision methodology, will help enable wise allocation of resources and stewardship over our companies so we can continue to multiply what God has given us and leverage discernment and good judgment in the face of a lot of unprecedented change, and apply principles that are stood the test of time to gain asymmetric advantage during this time of structural revolution. So if you have not started the physics of asymmetry, I challenge you to do so. In the next couple of videos, I think I got to talk you guys through the initiatives from the last quarter that I've done, how I manage that as a solopreneur, how I manage it with clients. I'm going to drop the link below for free. You can create your account. It'll save your progress. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.